My son's wife locked me in a barn with an untrained stallion to steal my ranch. She had no idea who was walking in. And welcome to satisfying drama stories, where family conflict, betrayal, and karma unfold in gripping, emotional stories with endings that deliver justice. If you love dramatic twists, relatable characters, and satisfying revenge arcs, you're in the right place. New stories every week. If you enjoy stories about family, betrayal, and justice finally being served, hit that like button and subscribe so you never miss one of these stories. Now, let's get into it. Eve had spent 30 years building something most people only dream about: 100 acres of rolling pasture, a working horse ranch, and a home that felt like it had grown out of the land itself. She and her husband had bought the property when they were newlyweds, back when the barn was falling apart and the fields were more weeds than grass. They spent years paying it off, working double shifts, saving every spare dollar, until they finally built the house Eve had always dreamed of. It was modeled after her grandmother's old farmhouse, the one with the wraparound porch and the tall kitchen windows that let the morning light spill across the floor. Every board and every fence post on that property held a memory. 3 years ago, Eve's husband passed away. The loss nearly broke her, but the ranch didn't stop needing her. Horses still needed feeding, fences still needed mending, and the work didn't wait for grief to pass. Her son, Marcus, came home not long after the funeral, saying he wanted to help her keep the place running. Eve was grateful. She gave him the guest house to live in rent-free and paid him a fair, steady salary to help manage the day-to-day work. For the first year, things were good. Marcus worked hard. He was up early, out late, and Eve genuinely believed they had found a rhythm that worked for both of them. She thought, for the first time since her husband's death, that the ranch's future was secure. Then Marcus brought a woman home and introduced her as Jessica, the love of his life. Eve remembered that first meeting clearly. Jessica had a tight smile and eyes that swept over the house like she was already redecorating it in her head. Something about her felt off from the very beginning, the kind of feeling a person can't quite explain but knows better than to ignore. Eve tried to give her the benefit of the doubt. She told herself it was just a mother's natural wariness of anyone who might take her son's attention away. But once Marcus and Jessica married and Jessica moved into the guest house, everything on the ranch began to change. Jessica was loud. She was blunt to the point of rudeness, and she spoke to Marcus in a way that made Eve's stomach turn, like she was talking to an employee rather than a husband. Within weeks, Marcus's work started slipping. He showed up late. He left chores half finished. When Eve asked him about it, he would mutter something about being tired, but Eve knew exactly where the excuses were coming from. Jessica began complaining that Marcus worked too much, that he didn't spend enough time with her, that the ranch was taking him away from their marriage. Marcus started taking days off, then entire weekends, leaving Eve to pick up chores that had once been his responsibility. At 63 years old, Eve found herself hauling feed, mucking stalls, and mending fence line alone, while her son and his wife went shopping or spent the day at the lake. Eve bit her tongue more times than she could count. She told herself it was a phase, that new marriages took adjusting, that Marcus would find his footing again. She held on to that hope right up until the day Marcus came home driving a brand new convertible. Eve stood on the porch and stared at the car, waiting for an explanation. Marcus told her, almost sheepishly, that he had traded in her work truck because Jessica wanted something more stylish. Not his truck, not their truck, Eve's truck, the one she used every single day to haul hay, feed, and equipment across 100 acres of working ranch land. That was the moment something in Eve finally snapped. She sat Marcus down that evening and made herself very clear. She told him to get her truck back, that there would be no more days off, and that the ranch's work would come first. She reminded him, plainly and without apology, that she owned this ranch, not Jessica. Jessica, who had been standing in the doorway listening, let out a short laugh. She looked Eve directly in the eye and said, "Not for long." Eve didn't dignify the comment with a response. She picked up a bucket of feed and walked out to the stables. She had recently purchased a new stallion, a strong, high-spirited animal she planned to use for breeding with her mares. He was young and still green, not yet fully trained, and Eve knew better than most that an untrained stallion required caution and respect. She stepped into his stall to feed him, just as she had done 100 times with other horses. But this time, the moment she was inside, she heard the stall door slam shut behind her. She heard the latch click into place. Eve froze. Her heart pounded as she turned to see the door bolted from the outside. She was trapped inside a stall with a stallion that had not yet learned to trust human hands, an animal that could turn dangerous with the wrong sound or sudden movement. She forced herself to stay calm, to keep her breathing steady, to avoid anything that might spook him. Panic, she knew, could get her killed faster than the horse could. Through the barn wall, she heard voices outside. It was Jessica, talking to Marcus in a low, satisfied tone. She said they would come back in the morning and say it was a tragic accident. She said the ranch would finally be theirs. Eve stood frozen in that stall, listening to her own son's silence as his wife calmly planned her death. But Jessica and Marcus hadn't accounted for one thing. Eve had asked her longtime neighbor Fred to stop by that very afternoon to deliver a load of hay she had purchased from him earlier that week. Fred pulled into the ranch right on schedule, completely unaware of what was happening inside the barn. As he carried the first bales toward the stable to stack them, he heard Eve's voice calling out to him, tight with urgency but steady enough to be heard. Fred found the latched stall door immediately. He threw it open, and Eve stepped out, shaking but unharmed. She thanked him quickly, her mind already racing ahead to what she needed to do next. Together, they walked toward the house. Through the kitchen window, Eve could see Marcus and Jessica standing inside, deep in conversation, gesturing at the cabinets and countertops like they were already planning renovations for a home that wasn't theirs. When Eve walked through the door with Fred right behind her, the color drained from both of their faces. Jessica took a step back. Marcus opened his mouth, but nothing came out. They tried to move past her toward the door, but Eve blocked their path, her voice steady despite everything she had just survived. She told Marcus to put the car keys on the counter. She told them both they had 30 minutes to pack their belongings and leave the property for good. Marcus tried to argue, saying they had no way to leave without the convertible. Eve looked at her son, the boy she had raised and loved and given every opportunity to make things right, and told him calmly that he could call a ride or he could walk. She didn't care which. She told him if she ever saw either of them on her property again, she would call the police and have them arrested without hesitation. 30 minutes later, they were gone. The silence that followed was the most peaceful thing Eve had felt in over a year. She sold the convertible without a second thought and used the money to buy back a reliable work truck. She sold the untrained stallion as well, and replaced him with an older, well-trained horse known for his calm and easy disposition, one she could trust around the property without fear. She hired a new ranch foreman, a man with strong references and years of honest experience, someone who showed up on time and did the work without complaint or excuse. Slowly, the ranch found its rhythm again. The fences were mended, the horses were fed on schedule, and the house that had once been filled with tension and resentment became quiet and peaceful once more. Eve stood on her porch many evenings after that, looking out over the 100 acres she had built with her own 2 hands, grateful that she had trusted her instincts, and grateful, more than anything, for a neighbor who happened to bring hay on exactly the right day. If this story kept you hooked, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more real-life stories just like it. Turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.